When it comes to screen printing, every color must be mixed and made individually to print that color onto a product. It's not like a digital printing piece of equipment that is using like CMYK, cyan, yellow, magenta, and black to print a full color image. With screen printing, we still have that capability using CMYK process inks, but most of the time we're going to do what is called spot color printing. Spot color printing is when you can look at a piece of artwork and you can identify each color within the design, and each color has to be printed individually and thus has its own screen and its own type of ink color exactly made. Now, when it comes to mixing ink, most shops don't actually invest in an ink mixing system, and instead they prefer to buy the most common colors of ink like black, white, red, royal, navy, and then from there they can tint the ink by using whites and blacks, and then maybe even mixing their own colors. Like I could buy red ink and yellow ink, bring them together and make a nice orange. So you can make your own ink colors by purchasing finished inks from any supplier, and by whipping them together. It's a lot like just mixing any color that you would think. It's a lot of fun, but it's hard to replicate that exact color again unless you are weighing out how much ink you're using of each, and you know exactly what each color was from the get-go. Now, what is actually more or less preferred by bigger shops is some type of ink mixing system. And there are two different types of ink mixing systems that a lot of ink manufacturers sell. The two types are an ink pigment mixing system, and the second being a finished ink mixing system. The finished ink mixing system is essentially using finished ink colors to then weigh out how much of each color to make a specific color. Now, when it comes to knowing what specific color to make, a lot of bigger companies, for example, they have logos with very specific colors, often referred to as a Pantone or PMS color, a Pantone mixing system. So what most screen print shops need to do is you need to buy what is called a Pantone book. And Pantone books come in two versions, coded and uncoded. It's pretty hard to buy one without the other. They're pretty much always sold together at the same time. Now, these two books are very expensive because every individual color in here had to be made and mixed from scratch by Pantone in order to create that true representation. They couldn't just digitally print these using a CMYK printer to get the true color. Now, Pantone booklets are used way outside just the screen printing world. I mean, a lot of decisions can be made as far as the color of a product and so forth, just because Pantone is essentially the godfather of the color wheel. I mean, they are the ones who've taken every color, designated numbers to it, and then it allows universally across industries for a company, for example, to have their logo printed, you know, with one color, but then have that exact color available on a product as well. When it comes to the Pantone books, again, they come in coded and uncoded. The majority of the time, you're going to be using the coded version, which is the coded often will designate with a number and then C, designated again, so coding. So one of the most popular colors would be, for instance, the 199C, which is a red, and 199U would be the same color but uncoded. Now again, there are two types of ink mixing systems. There is a finished ink mixing system and then pigment ink mixing systems. And most manufacturers, if they offer one, they typically carry the other. The finished ink mixing revolves around, again, taking the amounts of ink and adding them to a container and then mixing them all together. Now, the amount of ink to add is going to be dependent on the ink manufacturer itself. So most ink manufacturers have an online login where it has an entire database where you essentially put in a Pantone number, and then it'll spit out the formula of how much you need of every type of ink to create that color. Now, if you're using a pigment ink mixing system, it all works the same way, where you're going to log in to an online database, you're going to put in the Pantone number, but instead of using finished ink, you're going to primarily use a type of base that you will then add different amounts of pigment to it to create the finished ink itself. Now, the nice thing about working with a pigment-based ink mixing system is that you can swap out the base very easily. So if you want to offer, for instance, an opaque ink, and you want more of a softer based ink, and you want a puff ink, and you want a suede feeling ink, you can purchase different bases, have the ink mixing pigments, and then mix whatever type of ink you need on the fly. And again, it just allows you a lot more flexibility. An ink mixing system is going to allow you to match a color specifically compared to if you're just kind of just eyeing it and making it from scratch. And then two, it can often make you more efficient. You don't need to be buying big gallon containers of finished ink. You need to be buying big gallons of base that can then be turned at any color within a matter of minutes. If you have any questions on how to mix ink, do not hesitate contacting us. Thank you.